And welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who knows better than to go camping in January. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. Not only that, I know better than to go camping, period.
Really? You're not a big...
No, I'm not like that. I'm not Tom Haverford from Parks and Rec. No, I will go camping, but you are correct. January, less appealing. Apologies to our friends in Minnesota. I look forward to their letters.
Oh, they know not to go camping in January.
They probably do, actually. They know probably better than most not to go camping in January.
So our clever listeners may have figured out that we are here to talk January camp. So we did the quick roster reaction, right? When Greg Berhalter's 25-man January camp roster was revealed. That show's back in the feed if you want to go listen to it. But we thought that there were some lesser-known names in this roster, especially if you're not sort of a big soccer nerd like we are and watch all the youth players play. So we thought we'd do a sort of get to know the lesser-known players episode of the Total Soccer Show.
Get to know your new friends.
Get to know your new friends, because some of these guys could be senior US national team players by February 1st.
Sure.
By the evening of February 1st, after that game against Costa Rica.
I guess technically you are correct. That is right. Yes. If they make an appearance, then they are.
Yep.
Daryl's favorite kind of correct.
A quick refresher on this roster, though. It's interesting, right? It's January camp, which means very few European-based players, almost none. Only Ulysses Llanez in this case, because he was available.
And Christian Cappis.
Cappis, yeah.
But I believe they're on their winter break as well, because Scandinavia is cold.
It
also,
sure
don't go
is.
Camping in January there.
Terrible place to camp.
Again, the Scandinavians might go camping because they know how to handle it.
Yeah.
But I would not go camping in Scandinavia in the winter.
They've got the gear.
They do.
They've got
Plus,
the gear.
I've seen Troll Hunter, and I don't trust it.
So this January camp, it's a lot of MLS players, but it's also a lot of what I think is going to be the core of the U23 Olympic qualifying roster. It's a really interesting roster. Maybe later in the show we'll get into the odd makeup of this roster, which I actually feel quite positive about. I think it's a good step
I think
forward.
we will, because we've got some Twitter questions that we solicited. So we're going to do sort of get to know your new players, then we're going to answer some questions, and we'll see how long we go. Then we've got some news at the end about various youth teams as well.
Yeah, we do. Some U20 hires for the men's and women's national teams. All right, should we get to it then? We're not going to get into the goalkeepers.
Equally good hires.
Equally good hires.
Just kidding.
Some have better win percentages than others.
Yeah.
So the goalkeepers are Bill Hamid, Sean Johnson, JT Marcinkowski, and Matt Turner. I feel like most people will know enough about those guys, and we only ever have so much to say about goalkeepers.
I think we did get one tweet saying, I can't wait for you to break down the new goalkeepers. I think we had another tweet that asked if there was going to be like a spot, like a battle for the number 2 spot. Our answer is we're not going to, and maybe.
So Zach Steffen is the number 1. I would say Sean Johnson. No, Brad Guzan is the number 2.
Yes.
Or the co-number 1. So there's not really a battle for that.
And would be in this camp. We're probably going to repeat this a couple times. Brad Guzan would have been here, as would have Miles Robinson and Brooks Lennon. Atlanta declined that.
Yep,
so then we would have Brad Guzan, so then that would probably be, we've got the number 2. Then there's maybe a battle for the number 3 spot between everybody else that's there.
Everybody else that's there, including Bill Hamid, who's got the chance to prove that he is as good as those other men's national team players as he claims.
Newly of DC United, formerly of DC United, and also formerly of DC United. Yes.
So let's get to the defenders.
Let's do it.
Your defenders, I'm going to give the full list, but then we'll spotlight 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, okay? Julian Araujo, Reggie Cannon, Chase Gasper, Justen Glad, Aaron Long, Mark McKenzie, Sam Vines, and Walker Zimmerman. These are the guys called up. I want to start with getting to know Julian Araujo.
Let's do it.
So a lot of Galaxy fans, LA Galaxy fans will be familiar with Araujo. If you watch the youth national teams, you might be familiar with Araujo. He is an up-and-comer. He's an 18-year-old right-back who can play centre-back, but I'm pretty confident he's on this roster and on the U23 roster as a right-back, right? Here's the quick background on him. He played 18 games for the LA Galaxy last season. That is not bad for an 18-year-old getting a bunch of experience, right? The Galaxy was so keen to get him that even though he was in their academy, he's not a homegrown player. Do you know the story behind this? So he was also at the Barcelona Residency Academy for a little bit before, which meant that by the time the Galaxy wanted to get him in the first team, he hadn't been with their academy long enough to be a homegrown player. So they waived him, put him on the waiver, which is like a sort of free transfer, right? You go on the waiver wire or whatever it's called. The Rapids were top of the waiver wire. The Galaxy then paid the Rapids $50,000 in TAM.
Oh my gosh!
To make sure that the Galaxy could then sign Julian Araujo, and that is testament to 1, how hilariously complicated Major League Soccer is. 2, how good the LA Galaxy are at working the system, and 3, how much they wanted Julian Araujo, which is really the point here.
The Galaxy might be the best team in terms of working the system, but also like bullying the system at the same time. I think they're very good at that. That's one point. My second point...
Well, they put a horse's head in Colorado's bed as well.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll get the job done. But also, today, we're recording this on the day of the 2020 MLS Super Draft.
Yes.
And there was the moment...
Is it still a Super Draft?
It still is a Super Draft, despite being a conference call that is televised online.
It should be the MLS normal draft.
And thus not televised. It should be, the MLS normal draft. But one of the players, I forget who it was, basically was drafted by New England and instead given an Orlando scarf. And we had a tweet from somebody saying, like, no, I think in MLS rules that means he is now an Orlando player, that he's been claimed. And it's telling that I was sort of like, that might be a rule. Like, whoever puts the scarf on him first wins. It's a gold rush. You got to stake your claim.
I mean, I would watch that draft. That would
you got to chase him down and put a scarf on him?
Yeah, you get your fastest executive, and you've got to chase down a college soccer player.
I mean, yeah, I would watch that draft too.
But if you're watching Julian Araujo,
please.
as I have been, because this is it, right? I've watched a lot of footage. I want to let our listeners know what to look out for with Julian Araujo. This is a guy who is not big, right? He's not some big monster of a teenager. He's only 5'9". But he is strong, and he is not afraid to use his body, and he's pretty smart about doing it. And I'm talking, again, only 18 years old, but this is a kid who knows how to play against pros and do little things like hip checks that aren't fouls, but do knock the other person out of the way, right?
Yeah.
This is the thing that has impressed me about Araujo, is he already knows, you could call it the dark arts, or you could just call it how to be a pro.
Yeah, I think,
you get what I'm saying?
I think that's the title of the book: How to Be a Pro or The Dark Arts.
Yeah.
Whichever one you want to go with there. Yeah.
So he's great at those little hip checks, using his strength in a way that doesn't get him in trouble, but does get him the ball. He's not so great in terms of defensive right back stuff at decision making.
Well, then he fits right in with the rest of our right back options.
But he is thrilling, but also dangerous in terms of he will go charging out and try and get to a ball first. He will overrun when attempting to tackle a player and get sidestepped. But here's why it isn't bad enough to disqualify him from being a first teamish player in Major League Soccer. Once he gets sidestepped, he then runs you down and knocks you over, or or at least puts a shoulder in your back or something. So he's like not making the best decisions, but he is competitive and physical enough to always make up for it defensively.
Genuine question. Do you feel like you could say that about a lot of the players that you previewed? Because I don't think I necessarily have it in the notes, but that was a thing that stood out to me from a couple of the players that I'm talking about like, even when he gets beaten, he will sprint. Beats by Dre headphones. When he gets those, then he runs really hard. No, that he will sprint back like 30 yards, or his teammate is dispossessed. I felt like there was a lot of hard work that definitely at times made up for a lack of like big game awareness or familiarity.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair.
Which I guess is what you get when you have young players.
Exactly, yeah. And young pros who are looking like they're going to be something.
Also
you know what I'm saying? Araujo also not afraid to get forward at all. He's got some wheels, so he will join an attack quickly and provide width. He's not scared to go at someone. Can not like he's a wonderful crosser, but he'll get down there, get a cross in. So, I mean, I think we have plenty right backs for the senior men's national team, right? But to have an 18-year-old who could be a U23 right back, training with the senior team and possibly playing first-team football for the LA Galaxy in 2020, I'm pretty excited about this guy. Even with those little mistakes, which are kind of like 18-year-old mistakes to overcommit, those things always get better with professional minutes.
So 2 questions for you that I feel like might be useful for listeners as well. First off, you said he could be a center back, could be a fullback.
I mean,
sounds like you're thinking he'll be a right back?
I mean, yeah, he has played right back a bunch for the LA Galaxy, not least because Felcher had a couple of injuries last year, so he was the only right back available for the Galaxy for a little while. I think he's played centre back, I think it was in the LA Galaxy Academy and maybe for some US youth teams. 5'9", I'm not sure, at a senior level, he's going to be playing too much centre back.
Who are we playing on February 1st again?
Costa Rica.
It's Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Right.
And the imaginary game that you imagined against El Salvador, that imaginary game is not happening. It's only the one game against Costa Rica.
Cool. So if he were playing that game against Costa Rica, I'm assuming then your answer would be that you're expecting him to play right back if he were to play.
Absolutely.
Okay, so he'd be the right.
The other option is Reggie Cannon, who, if you're picking the most likely to win a game team, it's Reggie Cannon.
Right. But yeah. I'm not saying he will. I'm just saying if you were going to put him in there, because that's kind of how I went about this, was sort of looking at where is this player going to fit in if they were to play?
Oh, yes, of course. And that's a very smart way for us to preview this roster for our listeners, right? Yeah, if he were to play against Costa Rica, he would definitely play right back.
Okay. And then my other question that I have, which I didn't really plan ahead of time, but I'm realizing maybe this is the other one that would be useful, is that if you were going to explain him to a person who is unfamiliar with this roster, unfamiliar with him as a player, would you say right now he is a potential national team player in 2020? Would you say he's a potential U23 player, or would you say he's a third category of kind of other things that combine?
Potential U23 player for Olympic qualifying. in March/April.
Gotcha.
If we were weak at right back, he'd be a potential right back. But we've got Yedlin and Dest and possibly Tyler Adams and Reggie Cannon, and the list goes on.
Nick Lima's somewhere in there still?
Nick Lima's somewhere in there, but not in this January camp.
Not in this January camp. Interesting. Anything else to say about Mr. Araujo, or as Felipe Cardenas and Juan Carlos Osorio would call it, Araujo, I believe is how you say it if you're Colombian. Yes, I learned that when I was last talking to Felipe.
Well, both of those gentlemen speak better Spanish than I do, so I'm going to guess that
it's the Colombian pronunciation.
Oh, I see.
Yes, right. I think it's Araujo if it's Mexican. If it's Colombian, then it's Araujo.
Mine was the English West Midlands pronunciation.
Yours is, I think, the most correct.
Who else do we need to know from this roster?
Well, if we're talking fullbacks, let's talk Chase Gasper, 23-year-old left-footed left back from Minnesota United.
Okay.
We've talked about him previously when he was in camp once, I believe.
Yes, he was in camp briefly in November, but then not on the final roster, I don't think, for when the US played Canada and Cuba.
I mean, 0 appearances so far and 0 goals, which does tend to correspond, which means, at the very least he didn't play.
Yeah.
But we maybe will expect to see him in these games, because I do think that in terms of those categories I just gave you, he is 23 years old. My guess was that if we see him again, it would be with the national team this year. He's not a U23.
No,
he's not a whatever else type of call-in. And that makes sense because last season was his breakout season, and it kind of is justified when you look at everything he did on the field. He made aggressive, frequent attacking runs. You remember a lot of our conversation with Chase Gasper.
Yeah, we watched the footage back in November, right?
Yes, and so I'm very interested to see how he gets utilized if he ends up playing, because he can do a defensive job, don't get me wrong. He did a good job against Latam in the playoffs.
I thought he was pretty solid defensively when we watched the footage.
But he's very aggressive getting forward. He makes a lot of good runs out of the back. He will take players on. He likes that sort of getting past that last defender and then whipping in that low cross just in front of the 6-yard box.
Yep.
Quarter of uncertainty, if you will, if you want to go Adam Hurrey style cliches.
In America, it's called the hallway of uncertainty. It's called the hall pass of uncertainty.
Forgot about the corridor hallway situation. But so I think he is a very good attacking fullback, but that is not something we've seen Greg Berhalter utilize with that left back spot, at least not regularly.
Yeah.
So how Chase Gasper is utilized, if he's utilized at all, that's a thing I'm going to be paying attention to. The other thing I'm looking forward to watching is his defensive contributions, because he is literally a hands-on defender. He always makes physical contact. It seems like that is his primary way of defending, not like shoving or but it's just sort of he always wants to be in an arm's reach if he's getting into any sort of situation.
Does he get called for it a lot, or is it like Araujo where he knows where the line is?
I think he knows where the line is. Admittedly, it was like MLS playoffs was one of the games I was watching, so maybe some things allowed to like right before the MLS playoffs, so like maybe some things were being let go because it's near the end of the season, what have you.
His opponents weren't being let go.
No, they were not. But there wasn't a lot of like really obvious shoves in the back, professional fouls. It was just more so like nuisance defending, hassling defending, and he seemed pretty solid at that. So I look forward to, basically, if you're looking for a thing to watch from him, you can watch for a lot of hands-on defending and a lot of aggressive running.
My memory of when we watched the footage back in November, he loved a Cruyff turn.
Yep. Yeah, he does. That's what I'm saying. He'll utilize little moves and little tricks to get past people. Is
utilize the same as use, just longer?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I like utilize. Because I think use is more of, I don't know what it is. Like using a thing is just like a thing that's there, whereas utilizing it's like a skill that you've picked up.
Okay.
That's what I'm going with. That's the difference in my mind, at least.
Do you think we get to see him do a Cruyff turn in the game against Costa Rica? Like, if you had to put money on, do we see Chase Gasper do a Cruyff turn February 1st versus Costa Rica, yes or no? Would your money be on yes or no?
Yes, because I think you can do a Cruyff turn, not necessarily dramatically, but as a way, like if the ball's coming from the left center back to you and you're the left back, to sort of take it and move in that same direction. So I could see him doing that as well.
So you might just see a safe one, as opposed to a flashy attacking one.
Yes.
Okay.
My one other little thing, like that's a slight negative, the way I'm going to categorize this one would be that his distribution is ambitious, but not necessarily accurate, especially when trying to like aggressively play out of the back if he's trying to launch a counterattack or just move the ball forward.
Yeah.
It tends to be a direct pass that gets cut out. I saw a lot of that happening.
Doesn't like those.
He does
Mr.
not.
Berhalter doesn't like those.
So, which again feeds my question of where will he fit in here, because Berhalter doesn't like that. Berhalter hasn't really utilized a fully attacking left back. That's right, utilized again. So how will he utilize Chase Gasper? I'm excited to see how he's utilized.
Let's not utilize that word anymore. I will say...
no more utilization.
Berhalter has occasionally gone with an attacking left back, like when Serginho Dest played a couple. So it's not impossible that we just send Gasper out and say, hey, be an attacking left back, right? The other left back in camp, unless you've got anything else to say about Gasper,
I do not,
is Sam Vines. Sam Vines of the Colorado Rapids, 20 years old. He was a pretty regular left back for Colorado Rapids in Major League Soccer in 2019. Before that, he played a whole season with Charlotte Independence in the USL. So he's got like 2 seasons of professional soccer experience, right?
Did he have a preseason with Anthony Hudson in this case?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
Yeah,
just making sure.
Interesting.
Just making
we'll
sure.
Talk about Anthony Hudson later.
Oh, boy.
Don't worry. Here's the interesting thing about Sam Vines. He's kind of the opposite of Araujo, right? Never, ever overcommits. Everything I've seen is when he's playing left back defensively, which is how I'm going to start again, he will kind of just stand up his guy who's running at him and just make little shifts as the attacking player tries to shift with the ball. He's very good at just like shifting an inch this way, an inch that way, or a step this way, a step that way, and getting between you and the goal, essentially, but never commits to a big tackle. And it ends with the player either trying to go past you and you're getting like a tangle of legs with Sam Vines, or the player, the attacking player, making just enough space to get a cross in. But, and this is regular on a lot of footage I saw, not a great cross because Vines hasn't left you that much space, which I'm really impressed with, again, from a 20-year-old, right? He's really playing the positional, patient, stand-you-up game, which is not what you normally say about young left-backs.
We've talked about it in the past, but it's more like the Maldini way of defending, right?
Yes.
Where you don't go to ground, you never really want to go slide tackle.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just close down all the options and patiently wait for the attacker to make a mistake,
right.
Essentially. And then similarly, with the ball, he plays the simple pass. Right, he plays the simple pass. He will overlap because he's pretty quick. So if he'll play the ball into midfield, he'll occasionally then just go down the wing, or he'll play it to the winger and then overlap the winger. But he's not like left back, dribble at you, make something exciting happen. But he doesn't give the ball away a lot either. And I can see that is a reason why Berhalter would really like him, is that he's very safe with the ball, essentially, but still progresses it up the field with some 1-2s and smart passes.
So would you say he's more of a like Daniel Lovitz type, or is he a bit more, at least when it comes to the national team, do you think he'll be a bit more attacking than what we've seen from Lovitz so far?
I guess if I had to say, then yes, he is a Daniel Lovitz type. But I'm weirdly more excited about it because having that game maturity as a mid-20s experienced player like Daniel Lovitz is one thing, but having it as like a base level of talent as a 20-year-old, I think is kind of exciting. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
The maturity in a 20-year-old is exciting. The maturity in a mid to late 20s guy, it's kind of like, great, you're a pro, but maybe you shouldn't be a national team player. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
The only part so all-around sensible player, right, which is quite exciting. The only thing that's not all that impressive is his crossing, because his crossing falls into the same category of like safe but not exciting. As in, like, he will float a ball to the back post where there are a couple of his players, but it's definitely not like a whipped-in, targeted ball direct to this player's head. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's okay, but it's not a really dangerous cross that he's putting in.
Yes, I think that is probably, given that I have a couple players who are like that as well, maybe representative of, to your point, a younger player, a 20-year-old player who's maybe not quite backing themselves to try a certain pass or try a certain move, but kind of keep doing the things that they've been asked to do and keep the ball moving.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. Same question as before. Do you think he is a U23 Olympic type player, more so than a potential starter at left back?
I say yes, not least because he's been in a bunch of those U23 squads that Jason Kreis has called up. I think there's a good chance he's the starting left back for the U23s.
That ticks some boxes there. That makes sense. Anything else on Sam Vines?
Check and check. No, I'm ready to move on.
All right, we'll stay in the defense, though, because I'm going to tell you about Mr. Justen Glad,
Please do.
Man that we have talked about before.
Yeah.
And that is kind of where I'm coming from with Justen Glad, for those who aren't as familiar.
He's like 37, right?
That's the thing, man. It feels like he's been around for forever. He's 22. He is as old as some of the people who were drafted today, and yet has been playing for a very long time.
Yeah.
Still has not made a senior appearance for the national team, which
really?
I would have bet for all the world that he made like 3 or 4. Not so far.
Okay.
He's 22-year-old right-footed center back for RSL. And he is a player who I think you and I, because we've known about for a while, he has never been a player that we were particularly excited to see, or like, and I don't mean that in a negative, but just sort of like it was never a name that we were like, you got to have Justen Glad in there. How do you not?
For me, he was always an up-and-coming centre-back, but never the up-and-coming centre-back that I was excited about.
Yes.
Yeah?
Until, for me, this past season, especially near the end of this last MLS season, and Joe Lowry and I had a couple different conversations about it I think 2 of them on air, about how Justen Glad's distribution had improved so much that I was asking Joe, like, is this a thing he's always been able to do? And he was saying, like, no, this is kind of a newer thing.
Is a new thing?
It's,
okay.
Or at least it's the improvement, dramatic improvement, I would say, has been a more recent occurrence, evidently. And I would agree with that.
So he used to be regular delivery and now he's Amazon Prime.
Perfect. Yes. But he's a center back who I think does fit a lot of what Greg Berhalter's looking for from a center back. He can stride forward with the ball. He can evade a little bit of pressure and move forward with it. Doesn't just always look for lateral passes. He can boom balls forward. So if they're playing against a team that has a high line or is maybe being a little bit aggressive, he can hit that ball to launch a counter.
Yeah.
The one that he seems to favor a lot is if he's the left center back, it's a very boomed long diagonal ball over to the right back. And if he's on the right center back side, then it's to the left back. But he looks for that really long diagonal to trigger attacks when the opponent is sort of defensively solid in the middle. So that's a thing you can look for. What I was looking for in watching Justen Glad is sort of maybe why he hasn't gotten a cap yet, why he hasn't been such a consistent call-up.
Do you have an answer?
I mean, obviously people who watch him more regularly, RSL fans, can certainly have some views that are probably more accurate. But for me, it was that he does a lot of things very well that I would watch these sequences and be like, oh, wow, like that was a really big tackle that he needed to make. Oh, that was a great header. Oh, what a timely intervention. And then if you watch that clip again, you'll notice that, like, oh, he made a really good tackle, but it was because he kept his man on side because he was 5 yards deeper than everybody. Like, yes, he made that interception, but it was because he had sort of found himself in a space rather than closed down that space. Like, it was sort of, in a lot of his big moments, there were also questions of like, ooh, but if he hadn't been deep or been too far forward or what have you, would he have needed to make that play? And I think that's where it's sort of like, it's good, but then there's some inconsistency that if he doesn't make that big tackle, they're in on goal, or if he mistimes it, it's a red card.
Are you with me in thinking that maybe if he was 19, 20, that's forgivable, but once you're 22, you should be starting to lose those traits?
Yes, I would absolutely say that. And and I think that's where he is at this point in his career. And he was benched for a while. He wasn't getting as many minutes.
I was surprised by that,
Yeah, and so I think that probably factors into it too. And maybe now he has found that stability, has been rewarded with this January call-up. If we see him play, then it means I think he continued to impress in camp.
Yep.
If we don't, then I think it means he still has work to do.
Okay, the other newish centre-back in this group is Mark McKenzie. 20 years old, Philadelphia Union. He's a homegrown player. He was MLS Rookie of the Year in 2018. I'd forgotten that. Hey, Daryl here, cutting in with a quick correction. Mark McKenzie did not win MLS Rookie of the Year in 2018. He was a nominee, but Corey Baird won Rookie of the Year in 2018. The reason I got this wrong is that I'm bad at my job. So I started doing my research. The reason he didn't get much done in MLS in 2019 is preseason starts with an ankle injury. March brings a concussion. April brings appendicitis. That was Mark McKenzie's start to this season.
That's a less popular rhyming thing than like April showers bring May flowers.
Exactly, yeah. April brings appendicitis.
Yes.
And if you remember, most people, if you watch a U20 World Cup closely, will remember Mark McKenzie was the captain of the U20 World Cup team, Tab Ramos' U20 World Cup team, but he also wasn't fully fit.
No.
And he made a couple of appearances. I think he played twice. Didn't look like the Mark McKenzie that you would know if you'd seen him play for Philadelphia the year before.
Right.
I actually think it's kind of testament to his leadership skills that Tab Ramos and apparently all the players, I read a couple of quotes from players, they all just wanted him in the squad. They wanted him there. He's a presence in the locker room, a teammate and a leader that everybody wanted there, even though he wasn't fully fit and probably should not have been on the field based on the performances I saw.
Wasn't there also a thing where that call-up would have been around the time when Philly were pushing for top spot in the East, or they had a playoff game looming, or it was something where it was
definitely wasn't a playoff game because the World Cup was in May.
Okay, so maybe it was just that I remember there being a thing where ooh, and Philly might not let him go.
Right.
They kind of need him. We'll see how this plays out. And I think in the end he did go, obviously. Yeah. But I think even then there was debate about will they let him go play with the U20s because he is already so important for Philly.
Well, so we didn't see the best of Mark McKenzie in 2019, but he has a lot of gifts. Okay? So this guy, he's not a giant, right? He's 6 foot, which is almost like minimum. You must be this tall to ride this position height for a centre back, right? And so he's not crazy tall. He's not obscenely fast, but he's tall enough and fast enough to not be a thing that can get exploited. You know what I'm saying? He's not slow and he's not short. He's just not a dominant aerial presence. What he's really good at is stepping. He will be in the back of a striker, and that striker will kind of receive the ball. They're back to goal. They're back to Mark McKenzie. And McKenzie will find a way to, again, give that Araujo style little nudge or little sneaky step around and just get to the ball first. He is that defender as well that, you see a lot of times like balls will come in low, like crossed balls low or like hallway pass balls, corridor of uncertainty balls. And there tends to be like a centre-back who's always the one who steps and cuts it out. Mark McKenzie's that guy. He's the guy that's reading that ball is coming in, gets himself in position, blocks that ball coming in. So he's a centre-back who's reading the game and he's physically enough to like win little battles, right? So these are all great traits for a centre-back.
Given my concern about Justen Glad and how he occasionally drops in too readily, if they partner each other with McKenzie stepping out aggressively and Glad dropping in, we could have some problems.
Kind of a gap between
keep an eye on that one. Keep an eye on that one.
Well, maybe
Greg.
McKenzie will be so good that it won't even have to get behind. The other thing that he's really good at is bringing the ball out of the back. Not necessarily in a dribbly kind of way, in a picking out passes kind of way. He will break the lines like John Brooks-ish. He's right-footed. He'll play right centre-back, but he'll play passes that go into a striker and bypass midfield along the floor. He will play those big boom diagonal balls that you were talking about Justen Glad play. But he will also play, this is what really impressed me, I want to call it like the torpedo-driven ball. Where you can hit a crossfield ball, but it doesn't go very high. You kind of strike it sweet and low, and you can almost imagine it like whistling as it goes past. It travels very quickly, reasonably low to the other side of the field, and in like literally to the person's toe. Right, he will land it with the teammate that he's aiming for.
So ambitious, but also accurate.
Yeah, ambitious but accurate. That is Mark McKenzie passing the ball out of the back. So I'm pretty excited. We've just talked about two centre backs, but there's also Aaron Long and Walker Zimmerman on this roster. So I have no idea how much we actually see of these two guys against Costa Rica.
Okay. I think we'll probably get more to like who's going to play and what does this team look like and why are we doing this. All of those probably correspond to some of the Twitter questions that we'll get to later.
Okay.
Still several players to preview, discuss, explain. But first we should talk about today's sponsor, HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit delivery service. You can get mouthwatering seasonal recipes, pre-measured ingredients delivered right to your door with HelloFresh.
So Greg Berhalter builds a January roster. HelloFresh builds you a meal roster.
And I guess the players are sort of delivered to his doorstep?
Yeah.
If his doorstep is wherever camp is being held and not Qatar?
Yep.
And HelloFresh does the same.
And he's breaking out of his rut, right? Instead of Daniel Lovitz, which is you making pasta,
he's gone for figgy pork.
Greg Berhalter is mixing it up with some chicken parm, like a Sam Vines.
I think that's still pasta, but I take your general point, yes. And that is, I should add, the figgy pork comes to mind for me because that is one of the low-calorie options I believe we were sent. My wife has...
That's why we got different meals.
Indeed. Okay. She has more dietary restrictions these days, so we were looking for something that could accommodate that. HelloFresh essentially did that. We had like figgy pork, so you don't have a lot of carbs there.
What does figgy pork mean? Does it mean it's pork
with figs?
Figs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And some rosemary potatoes, I do believe. You got like a maple chicken with butternut squash and maybe sweet potatoes, I think it was.
What time am I coming around?
Whenever you want, buddy, is when we'll have eaten. And I'm sure there'll be some scraps left over for you, maybe.
I'll come in and wash up.
Yeah. Perfect. But I should say, we got the 2-person meal plan, but you can get it for larger groups if you so need. So you could accommodate Daryl and his wife coming over if you wanted to, but I don't.
How about that? Also, in the copy here, I've never seen this before, HelloFresh's carbon footprint is 25% lower than store-bought grocery-made meals. So if you're looking to decrease...
Do you have a source on that? Are you sure?
So my source is the University of Michigan.
Oh, okay, cool. As long as there's a source, then I'm good with it. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's good. We don't want footprints and we don't want carbon.
But it's spelled S-A-U-C-E.
Oh boy! now I have questions. Now I have concerns.
It's not really.
It is not. But you know what it is? Now basically available from $5.66 per serving, which is a good way of saying that it also saves you some money because, but at that rate, I'm pretty sure you're not finding many delicious dinner options, food options, if you're going out and asking them to bring you something for $5.66.
I mean, you could try at a restaurant, but I'm not sure how well that would
be. An interesting way to order. Bring me something for $5.66. You'll get like 2/3 of a beer in certain places, I think is how that will work.
Unless you go to HelloFresh.com/TSS10. That's HelloFresh.com/TSS10 and use the code TSS10. That's TSS10 during HelloFresh's New Year's sale. And you'll get 10 free meals, including free shipping.
One more time, that's HelloFresh.com/TSS10. And you can use the code TSS10 during their New Year's sale for 10 free meals. Thank you very much to HelloFresh for sponsoring this episode of The Total Soccer Show. Holbrook. You just went with Mark McKenzie. Does that mean it's my turn to talk to some players?
So we're on to the midfielders, right?
All
Who are the midfielders that we need to introduce to our listeners? We need to get to know them better.
Let's talk about a man who I wasn't even sure how to pronounce his name last week. I'm more confident this time round. It's Christian Cappis.
Why are you confident that it's Cappis and not Cappi, which a lot of people seem to try and go with?
Because I watched a couple different games or highlights from a couple different games. The Scandinavian broadcasters all went with Cappis. Yeah. And I believe I heard that from some of his teammates too, because some of those games were not well attended, and thus you could hear the field noise instead of the crowd noise. But Cappis is a 20-year-old left-footed central midfielder for Holbro in Denmark.
Yep.
Most footage, I should note, that I saw from him is from Denmark in November and December, so grain of salt there because it looked wet and cold.
Right.
Everyone had long sleeves and gloves.
So not camping weather?
But also not the prettiest weather for like playing very fast, free-flowing soccer.
Yeah.
And I do think the soccer kind of reflected that. It was pretty physical.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just saying that as I don't know if that is kind of his game and Holbro's game as a whole, or if it was just bad weather leading to not the prettiest of soccer.
I mean, there's like 1 week of sunshine.
All right. So maybe it's a good indicator. And it did, with in mind, take me a minute to kind of see what I think is going to happen with him with the national team, and then it made sense. Because he plays in various formations as a central midfielder, but I saw him pretty regularly in a 4-4-2 as one of those two midfielders, and I wasn't quite sure.
4-4-2 in Scandinavia.
Shocking. But to me, that meant like, okay, maybe he's going to be more of a number 8, and so then I started watching him as a number 8, but then he was kind of attacking at times, and really what it ended up being was number 6, and once you see him as a number 6, it makes a lot more sense, because he can do a lot of what I think Greg Berhalter wants from his number 6. He can stay deep and shield that back line without getting caught out, without going charging forward into the attack. He can play those diagonals. He can play simple passes. He's not really a flashy dribbling past people or trying to beat people with skills. He is very much a keep it moving type of guy.
Okay.
So much so that like the way I kind of found myself thinking of him, if you had been in the room, you would have heard me say it. Instead, it was just in my head. But it was a lot of like, yeah, that was fine. Like it's just sort of
not unimpressed, but not overly impressed.
Exactly. Like he can bring the ball down under pressure. That's great. But then it's usually going to be like, and then the ball goes back to the center back or goes laterally to like the open fullback. Yeah. I didn't see him trying to turn and play the ball forward. I didn't see him trying those sort of probing passes. When he would hit those long diagonals, it was because there's 30 yards of space on the right side, and that switch is on. It wasn't always or even regularly as much a pinpoint ball over the top into an on-running fullback who's now gotten past the defense.
What's he like defensively? Is he wrecking people, or is is he Michael Bradley like crouch defensive position, or is he Alfredo Morales?
He's more Alfredo Morales. He's definitely more Alfredo Morales. He's more of a patrols the midfield. He's going to contest every 50-50. He is going to basically fight people for the ball. He's probably going to give up some fouls. He's not going to let anybody get by him easily. And so I don't think he's going to be a very glamorous player for the U.S., at least not right now.
Okay.
But I think he's going to be a sort of fight for every ball and then play the simple passes, hit some of those diagonals, be good defensively.
Could he play at a higher level? I mean, for example, a bigger European league. Could he move to Germany?
I mean,
Netherlands.
That's always tough because again, I'm going from a lot of Y-Scout highlights here. It's not as though I've watched every single one of his games in and out. But I mean, he's starting every single game for Holbro, who are a decent team in Scandinavia, and seems to be a very important player for them, and doesn't stand out in a bad way. Like I never saw those moments of he's getting in there because he's young and exciting. It was sort of he seems to be doing everything that's asked of him, and I think if you're looking for a young player who does a good job and does what's asked, I feel like that's what a lot of teams would like. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting a move, but I doubt he moves to Dortmund and starts, or Wolfsburg even and starts.
And so remind me his age again. Is he U23?
20 years old.
20 years old. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. That's quite impressive then to be a defensive midfielder regularly at 20 years old.
Yeah.
Right?
So so I think he is another one who I would expect to be more Olympic minded than national team appearances regularly this 2020.
Yeah.
I may well be wrong, but that's where I would kind of put him as a 6/ potentially number 8 who will get some time with the U23s. Maybe we'll see him once or twice more with the national team, but I'm not so inclined to think that's going to happen right now.
Okay, moving on. I'm going to let people know about Brenden Aaronson. If you're a Philadelphia Union fan, you'll know all about Brenden Aaronson. If you're a US men's national team fan and that's all you watch, you might have noticed he was called up in October, but didn't get on the field against Cuba or Canada. But I think this is a guy we should be excited about.
Okay.
So Brenden Aaronson, 19 years old, great feet. So many times you see Brenden Aaronson receive the ball and he'll quickly turn or spin and make a bit of space for himself, and then he'll find a pass, and then he'll move, and the game really keeps ticking. He looks like he's in a rondo all the time. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I'll wait till I ask you.
Go ahead.
I have a player comparison for you, and I'm wondering what you make of it. It's obviously not where he is quality-wise, but in terms of the player he reminds me of, and maybe it's a little bit he's got a kind of a strange posture and a goofy haircut, it's Thomas Muller is who he reminds me of a little bit.
Oh, that's interesting. I've got in my notes, if I had to compare him to a well-known player, it was Luka Modric.
Okay. Yours is maybe better? I guess, he's a Ballon d'Or winner is probably better. Yeah. I just love Thomas Muller. That's all.
Great feet, will control a ball, make a bit of space for himself, find a pass. He can also play some really nice, clever through balls. So, I've seen him set some stuff up for Philadelphia Union, pick out teammates with some really good chipped ball precision type thing. Definitely a Berhalter player, right? Because Berhalter loves players who can move the ball around, unsettle the opposition, and then pick passes that exploit any positional inefficiencies in the opposition, right? Any holes he can get through. He's not that direct or ruthless. You know what I'm saying? I have seen him receive the ball in the box, have a player in front of him between him and the goal, and he'll look for a clever pass, right? He doesn't seem to be I'm going to beat you, I'm going to put it in the bottom right corner. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
How old is he again?
19.
Yeah.
Right? So he's maybe lacking that.
That feels about the right age for that to be your decision-making process a little bit, yeah.
But it depends, right? There are 19-year-old players who are just give me the ball, I'm going to go at him.
Also true.
Right? And it's all about...
We'll talk about an 18-year-old one of those in a little bit.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, but it's all about finding that balance, right? So right now, I don't feel like Brenden Aaronson has that direct threat, but he just looks so alive and sharp and constantly moving the ball. And then what I'm really excited about is I could describe to you a great technical player who's really good at pass and move stuff. You wouldn't necessarily then also think, and this player is absolutely tenacious on defense. Right. Okay. So one of the reasons that Brenden Aaronson started so much for Philadelphia Union last year, he played 28 games. Didn't start all of them, but started a lot of them. When there's, Marco Fabian is there in a similar-ish position, right, the tip of the diamond, attacking midfield position, is that Brenden Aaronson will press and press and press. He will chase opponents down. If he loses the ball in the middle of all his passing, he will chase opponents down and win the ball back. I think that's the key here. Is we've got a player who's technically good, can see a pass, and then will also do a defensive job. And he's only 19 years old.
And so, forgive me if you've already said this, in the Berhalter system, where do you expect him to be, again, if he were to play against Costa Rica?
If he were to play in the Berhalter system, he would be either the number 8 Weston McKennie role, but more likely the number 10 Christian Pulisic role, I think. Okay. In fact, definitely more so the Christian Pulisic / Sebastian Lletget role.
I agree, and I also think we actually will see him get minutes. Probably won't start. I do think that my inclination right now, based on nothing, is that Berhalter will go sort of with the usual, the core group, as it were, and then maybe bring in some substitutes who are some younger players to get their debut.
So Lletget would be the senior number 10 on this roster.
And my guess would be he starts Lletget, and then Aaronson gets some minutes in the second half.
That makes sense to me. It also, from a Brenden Aaronson perspective, because he's been with the U23s before, obviously. He's been with the senior team before, like I said, in October, but didn't play. In terms of career progress, making his national team debut would make sense, even if it's only for 5 minutes. It would make sense in February against Costa Rica, February 1st.
All right.
Yeah.
I would look forward to that.
Yep. The American Luka Modric.
I would look forward to our next player, the American Luka Modric. The American, I don't know, he might be good, is who we're going to talk about next. 16-year-old player, and that's a key point to start. It's Bryant Kayo. Bryant Kayo? Yeah, no one really is sure. That's what I've learned.
He is, however you pronounce his name, to me, he is the absolute outlier on this roster, right? Okay. This roster has some senior players like Christian Roldan and Sebastian Lletget. Yeah. It has essentially U23 players who are getting a look with the senior team. Mm-hmm. And then it has Bryant Kayo.
I said he was 16, my bad. He's 17 now.
That makes all the difference. Yes. It doesn't. He's still very young.
And that's where I have my notes. Is first off, it's a weird thing to list as a negative, but it's worth remembering is that he's literally a child. He's legally literally a child. And I say that just to say, Travis and I talk about this on Top Drawer, about how weird it is to be I don't know if he or she has got it when we're talking about youth national teams, and then we're talking about a 16-year-old. That feels harsh.
Yeah.
And I say that not necessarily to say, and so we shouldn't be mean to him if he has a bad game, but just to say that I think it's worth remembering that he is 17 because he plays like a 17-year-old. A lot of the footage I saw from him was in the U17 World Cup, but he looks like a player who can be very, very good, but is also susceptible to ball watching, to having like sloppy touches when it's not necessary, to getting tunnel vision. He concedes a penalty against the Netherlands by kind of going for a poke tackle and not realizing that the opposition player is turning, and he just kind of goes in clumsily, knocks the player over, obvious penalty given.
No one had a good U17 World Cup.
They really, really did not.
Right. So where else would we have seen Bryant Kayo?
I mean, I guess like maybe he was with the DC Academy many years ago. Then he was with Orange County. Yeah, he is with Unattached FC right now because he's another player who, once he turns 18, we would expect to move to Europe. But right now he cannot, which is maybe partially explains why he is with this team right now, because he's not anywhere else. So why not give him some runs? But I do think he's a player who will really, really benefit from just being in this camp. I don't think he's going to play, but I think it will be very eye-opening because he is so physically imposing and very fast that there were so many moments in that U17 World Cup.
I've only seen a bit of footage. Is he a big, tall guy, like very long-legged?
Yes. I have no idea how tall he is, but he was way bigger than everybody else. He is that, like, absurd level of fitness of skinny and muscular at the same time. Where
so he's not skinny like you can knock him over.
No, but he's also not like this big like Troy Deeney style forward. Like no, he is like lean and incredibly fast and strong.
All right.
And like the thing that I would say like stood out to me from that U17 World Cup is that he did a lot of like fine, I'll do it myself moments of like he would get the ball and turn, usually playing as like a number 8 in the 3-man midfield, turn and just nobody around him, and so he would drive 40 yards forward with the ball, or he would sprint 40 yards back to make a defensive play when like somebody else had been caught out. And it was a lot of really, really, really hard work for him. And I think he could kind of make up for some of those youngster mistakes because he was so fast, is so fast. Going to a national team camp, he's going to have to adapt. And I think it's going to be very eye-opening, but I think he will not stand out physically in a negative way. I think he can handle the physicality. I think if he can sort of tighten it up a little bit, I think he'll be a very good performer for the national team. Maybe soon, but certainly long term, I think he is a player to keep an eye on.
And here's my argument for why it's a good thing that he's in camp, even if it turns out he's not ready to play international senior men's football on February 1st, which makes sense given his lack of senior professional minutes, right? It's still a good experience to spend 3 weeks in camp with men's national team players and Greg Berhalter coaching you.
If I were making a prediction about this roster and who ends up where, I really think he's a player who American fans are going to love like 3 years from now. Not to say that like he's really bad right now.
We'll be watching him in the Bundesliga?
But just, I think so. And then
Wolfsburg he was linked with, right?
Yes. But he reminds me a lot of like a Weston McKennie, for example. Or just Weston McKennie. We could just say Weston McKennie instead of a Weston McKennie. But he, like, I think especially if he develops that technical side, which it stands to reason he would in Germany, just the heart and the energy and the sort of determination that he brings into games, I think American fans are going to love him because he will do that. 30-yard sprint back to put in a challenge or to make a professional foul. And he did that regularly with the U17s, as I said. So I think that sort of energy and dedication combined with developing skill set, I think will make him a key performer for the U.S. If he were to play, as I said, I think we would see him in like the sort of number 8 spot. I don't think we will again because he's 17, but I think he's one that I hope a lot of people ask about in the post-match press conference so we can hear how he did in the camp.
All right. One name that we chose to...
I also hope they ask about it because I still don't properly know how to pronounce his name, so that would also be useful.
One name we chose to include on this Getting to Know You Better list, but I feel like a lot of people will know already, Paxton Pomykal.
Yeah.
Paxton Pomykal, first of all, very memorable name. Just turned 20, so still a youngster.
Yeah. I'm really happy you put him on this list.
Okay. So FC Dallas, played the full season, right? People will know him most... If you're only watching US national team stuff, you will know him from the U20 World Cup, where he was very, very good for the United States.
Made one cap already, though, right? Made one appearance for the national team?
He played for 5 minutes
there it is.
Against Uruguay. So he has made his debut.
But he had moments. That's the thing. He's that type of player where it was like, ooh, like I'm kind of excited about him. He had 5 minutes. He like got into space once and found an easy or smart pass. And that stood out to me. And then he's a player who was, at MLS All-Star as well?
I remember when we saw him come on. They're playing Atletico Madrid. MLS All-Stars. He really looked the part, right? In a game where certain players who I won't name looked like they were struggling against Atletico Madrid. Paxton Pomykal.
You're right. I'm glad that you didn't say any names like Graham Zusi. That would have been troubling. So good of you for not saying any names in particular.
Paxton Pomykal came on and looked like he could match them in terms of finding space. I mean, he was keen, right? And he was excited to make an impact, I suppose. But he just looked like he belonged, right? Okay, so if you've never seen Paxton Pomykal before, or you've only seen 5 minutes against Uruguay, he's a little fella, 5'7".
He is.
He's left-footed. He can dribble with close control. This is the thing I notice about him all the time. You see him dribbling forward, the ball doesn't go very far away from him. You know, some players like push the ball quite far out and go after it. He keeps the ball tight to his body, but moves up the field with little tiny bursts of pace. Kind of Leo Messi-ish in that sense, which is, I know is a big comparison. I'm not saying he's as good as Leo Messi. I'm just saying that some players have that capability to dribble with the ball close to their feet.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like I should add here that when I talked about Kayo making those driving runs forward, that is also how he dribbles. That even though he's considerably larger than, say, Paxton Pomykal, he keeps the ball very tightly controlled, so he tends to either find his way through and then find a pass or get fouled because he's not playing the ball way out in front of him. So thank you for jogging my memory on that one. That was the last thing I meant to say about Kayo. Now let's talk about Pomykal a little bit more. All
right, so the thing about Pomykal, so he can dribble at people. He also seems to very often pick out the correct pass. Right? At 20 years old, he will often play very nice, like through balls that no one else saw, right? He can also play big balls, which I know it's become kind of a theme of this, but I guess it's a little bit of a Berhalter theme as well, right? Who can hit the diagonal? Paxton Pomykal can hit the big diagonal. He's also pretty good defensively and pretty tenacious, similar to Brenden Aaronson, right? You will see him run someone down, win the ball off them, but I also see a lot of things where a counterattack starts because Pomykal closes down someone really quickly, wins the ball, and away we go. Yeah. Right? So there's just a lot to like.
Despite his name,
Paxton
he's
Pomykal.
not peaceful. He's aggressive.
He's not.
He'll win that ball.
There's just a lot to like about Paxton Pomykal. I honestly think he should be on a senior men's national team roster, even with everybody available, and I would be happy to see him on the field.
This is why I was happy you included him, because I know you've already finished the Watchmen series, right?
Yes.
No, I'm like halfway through. No spoilers. I've seen the movie as well. But you know, like the Doomsday clock that's always like counting down to Doomsday, and it kind of like they adjust it based on the time. I feel like we need a Paxton Pomykal clock, because I keep thinking it's like, and there he is. Now he's like a national team player.
Yeah.
And like, oh, MLS All-Star. Then he's going to be there. Oh, he made that 5-minute appearance. We're going to see him again. And then we kind of don't. And I never quite know where he is on that clock. And it seems like maybe that's where you are as well, that he could continue to play with like the Olympic team and youth teams, but maybe we'll see him with the national team as well.
I really feel like the Olympics is in his way in terms of how much he gets to play for the senior team, and we almost need to get the Olympics over with so that Paxton Pomykal can just in September be properly in contention with no distractions for the senior men's national team.
I like that. I have a question about the Olympics for you in a moment, but I am aware that I'm kind of hijacking Paxton Pomykal. So I want to let you finish.
I do have one final point about Paxton Pomykal, and it's about his position. I have seen him play left wing successfully for the U20s. I've seen him play number 10 for FC Dallas.
Greg Berhalter is rubbing his hands together right now.
I've seen him play number 8 for FC Dallas.
Less so now.
And I actually, because I'm very good with my research, I went back and watched the last 5 minutes of USA v Uruguay in September when he made his debut. He came on at left wing. Okay. So I don't know if that's where Berhalter sees him, or if it was just like, Jordan Morris looks tired, we can get you in for 5 minutes. I don't know how telling it is that he played left wing in his 5 minutes.
I'm gonna say I think it's telling.
Okay.
Because we've seen Pulisic sort of maybe kind of used there, but it seems like Berhalter wants to use him centrally, which does speak to then a kind of lack of variety and depth in those wide attacking spots. Like it's usually Paul Arriola, Jordan Morris. They've done fine, but are those the two necessarily that we like want to back when we go to the World Cup, or we want some people pushing them? Right now, I'm not really sure who those people are, so I would expect maybe Pomykal fits in there a bit more than maybe as that number 10.
Interesting. Okay.
That's my feeling.
If we see him in this game, though, against Costa Rica, don't we already have plenty wingers on this roster? We got Llanez and Lewis.
I feel like we've already established we have 2 number 10s.
And if Jordan Morris could go wide. But I could see Pomykal playing number 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then that would put him into the, what he's in there, Christian Roldan, obviously.
Roldan, yeah.
And then maybe Bryant Kayo, although, again, I don't think the 17-year-old is going to play in this game.
Yeah.
So, okay, that makes sense.
So maybe he's the second choice number 8 on this roster.
Yep.
Yeah. So there you go. Paxton Pomykal, definitely a name worth knowing.
Another name worth knowing would be today's sponsor, Roughneck Scarves.
Hey, Roughneck
Our old
Scarves.
pals at Roughneck Scarves. So we are expecting maybe we'll see you next week when we're at the Coaches Convention in Baltimore. We saw them in Chicago. I'm just going to go ahead and operate on the assumption that was precedent. They will be there this time, and we'll hang out again.
Yeah, we'll go see them at their booth.
I like that plan. I like this plan. But yes, Roughneck Scarves, the official scarf providers of U.S. Soccer, Major League Soccer, the USL, and the NCAA.
And for people with cold necks.
And for people with cold necks. Of course, they also have the custom scarf option. So if they have an offering, or they don't have an offering you would like, although they probably do because they have pretty much everything, you could also make a custom option. Yep. And that's what we're going to go for here, because we asked if you were to design a custom Roughneck scarf to represent the USMNT Men's National Team January camp. What would it look like? We had several responses, many of them negative. We're going to keep it a little more positive here with some of these.
So we chose 4 at first. At DGun01 says, it would be a baby scarf made by someone who hadn't worked there long. I'm going to guess that's a reference to the youth of this roster.
Yeah, I think so. I think you could do that one, or you could do with like the youth of the roster combined with the lack of people picking those youth players. That maybe means the people who would be involved in that not there so long. At Boulder Hawk suggests Qatar on one side, Serginho Dest on the other. I guess not existing in Qatar.
So this is not really related to the January camp, but the US men's national team January camp, was originally going to be in Qatar.
It was.
But then because of, let's just say...
Did something happen?
Security concerns in the Middle East. I can't even get into it, honestly.
That's fair.
We'll get complaints.
Yep.
Security concerns in the Middle East.
We already do.
The US soccer decided to bring players home, and now the camp is happening in Bradenton. Right? So that's one thing that happened with US soccer.
Wait, are you telling me that there was instability or potential instability related to a country that's currently blockaded? No.
But also, Ajax were there having a winter training camp in Qatar. I'm just going to keep pushing.
I know you are. That's why I'm laughing.
Serginho Dest was with Ajax.
He was?
He decided that he didn't feel safe in Qatar because of recent events.
Weirdly,
in the
neither
Middle
did the
East.
Nepalese workers who were forced to work there. What? Sorry, continue.
And he basically said, can I just leave camp and go back to the Netherlands? And they let him leave.
Yeah, because he had a passport. He could go back.
Yeah.
Yes. He went back, though. So we're happy Serginho Dest is back, although we're sad that he's not with the Ajax teams, especially since it feels like maybe he's lost that starting spot.
Yeah, Mazraoui's back, right? Mazraoui's back and playing right back. I can't imagine Ajax will hold this against him.
I feel like feelings of personal safety and like the awareness thereof probably trump the January camp in the Middle East. Yeah, for sure. Yep. At Riley Dog Bieber, it would be a spool of yarn not yet made into a scarf because potential! Exclamation point.
I like it.
I knew you would. I knew you would.
At Yaz Nasty says, on one side would be Berhalter throwing a Ulysses Llanez shaped bone to US fans, and on the other side would be fans complaining because there still aren't enough teenagers with no first team appearances for their club on the senior US men's national team roster.
Yeah, that checks out. That checks out indeed. We're going to talk Ulysses Llanez here in just a moment. I would like those custom scarf options. I like most of the scarf options that Roughneck have on offer, and I also like not having to pay full price, Daryl.
Yeah, if you go to roughneckscarves.com and you use the code Total Soccer Show, all one word, Total Soccer Show, you get 20% off when you buy a scarf from roughneckscarves.com. It doesn't apply to the custom orders because that's a whole separate deal. But if you buy anything that you see at roughneckscarves.com, 20% off. Total Soccer Show is the code.
So thank you very much to Roughneck Scarves for sponsoring today's episode. Thank you to everyone who submitted ideas for custom scarves. And thank you to Ulysses Llanez for brightening up the American national team fandom, or at least the men's national team fandom, by being on this roster. Because I do think that made a lot of people feel more optimistic than usual about the January camp.
Sure did. All right, so let me give you the quick rundown of forwards. There are 6 listed, like basically strikers and wingers. You've got Paul Arriola, senior. Jesus Ferreira, Ferreira, Jonathan Lewis has made some senior appearances already. He's got 5 caps. Ulysses Llanez, no senior caps, no senior appearances, no U23 call-ups even. We haven't seen him for the US since the U20 World Cup. Jordan Morris and Jassy Zardes.
Right. One of the reasons why maybe I haven't seen him for the U23s is because he's 18. So he is still young. And I feel like
but so are Ledesma.
Very true. Very true.
And Alex Mendez. Essentially the same cohort as Ulysses Llanez, and they've been U23 regulars.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Ulysses Llanez, for those who are less familiar, 18-year-old, right foot dominant is what I'm going to say. Not right-footed, but right foot dominant. Okay. He can play with both. Winger, he can play on the left or the right, which I think will be very appealing to Greg Berhalter because he is pretty dangerous on either the left or the right. As I said, he can use both feet. You will see the Travello right foot on occasion, indicating, again, right foot dominant. But he has really nice, tight control, especially at pace. He can bring the ball down over his shoulder, but he can also then just turn
like a wide receiver.
Yeah, really, really similar to that on a couple occasions. That it was really did drop, and he brought it down at speed going forward, which is pretty skillful.
To see that. Yeah.
And he does love a dribble. I'll say that much for sure. He's good at low crossing in particular. When he plays simple, which he is also capable of doing, he really excels. When his passing is just sort of quick 1- and 2-touch passing, he really is able to pass and move and get into space and cause some problems. When he dribbles, he causes problems too. I just feel like on occasion I saw him dribble too much. That may be because he was playing with that U17 team that wasn't doing particularly well. So it might have been, the U20 team, I think, that it was kind of
last time I saw him was the U21 U20 World Cup. He wasn't fully fit, so he only played like the end of games.
Right, and he would kind of come in and basically try to do stuff. He would try stuff. And on occasion that would work. On occasion it would lead to him getting fouled, and then frequently it would lead to him sort of beating one person, but then the ball being intercepted by a second, or him losing the ball to a third defender. But he liked taking people on for sure. Did
you get to watch much of his U19 Wolfsburg performances?
No,
so I've seen a lot of footage, but it's just highlight footage. But it has been like a goal or an assist or a couple of goals at almost every appearance. Ulysses Llanez appears for the Wolfsburg U19s and he makes something happen. And I wish that I could watch a full game to know, is he like trying stuff all the time and this one thing or two things come off and he looks like a hero, but the rest of the time he's maybe taking too many risks and losing the ball? I'd like to know what his sort of ratio of success is.
So can I tell you my half-baked theory that sort of explains that? I think I started to explain this to you via text earlier, but it's the thing I found watching a lot of our national teams, especially the youth national teams playing, that at times it feels like there are two teams existing inside one team, that it looks like the defenses and the attack are much more like Liverpool, Man City, aggressively, let's get the ball forward, let's possess the ball, let's move it fast, let's find opportunities, let's get shots off. And then the midfield three feels more like a Mourinho midfield of sort of like, let's slow it down, let's make sure we've got the right shape, then one of us will show. And so I think I say that just to say that with Wolfsburg, there's a decent chance that they're just playing much faster and he's therefore getting the ball in more favorable situations to be in better shooting opportunities or better passing opportunities. Whereas with the U.S., I feel like he's getting the ball 40, 50, 60 yards from goal and then having to turn it run at people because it's a little bit slower, so everybody ends up dropping deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think that might also be why maybe he's a bit more successful, why he has better highlights with Wolfsburg, just because he's getting the ball in attacking positions and being told go do stuff versus getting the ball in your own half and being told dribble all the way forward and then try to find somebody to pass to or maybe get a shot off.
Is he ready for a senior men's national team debut? Because he's a Wolfsburg U19 player and he's doing incredible things that look great on video.
I mean,
in a highlight reel. Do you know what I'm saying?
Here's my answer, even though it's going to sound like a cop-out answer. That is very much up to Greg Berhalter in terms of if he comes into camp and is ready. But my answer to you is he is ready to be in a senior camp, yes. Because I think similar to Kayo a little bit, where you can see him sort of dominating within his age group, I want to see what he does against fully grown men who have fully grown experience.
So this is a good challenge for him.
Yes, and I feel like Ulysses Llanez, he can take people on. He was like tooling the Qatar national team at the U20 World Cup or with the U20s. And like, is that a good indicator of what he's going to be able to do for the senior national team? I don't know. But I think if you bring him into camp and he tries to dribble past somebody and he gets knocked off the ball, maybe he tries it again because that's his approach and he succeeds. But maybe he learns, okay, this time I'll play a little bit more simple. Like, I think he needs those sort of reps as well to find himself in the right situation.
I'd love to know what happens in January camp the first time he dribbles at, say, Aaron Long.
You know what I mean? I feel like he probably gets thumped. I do think that's probably how you sort of respond to youngsters trying stuff, and especially because there are all those stories about players, like young players coming in and going for a meg and then just getting like cleared out because like that's not what you do in this team. It's not about individuality.
It's weird that I chose Aaron Long though, right? Because like,
he shaved his head now. He's a tough guy.
But John Brooks isn't there, or Michael Bradley's not there, or like some senior pro is not there.
I feel like Paul Arriola would be one to leave a tackle or two in just to let people know. And despite seeming like a very lovely person, I just feel like, he would kind of continue that idea. But I do think Ulysses Llanez is 100% going to try to beat somebody. He is the type that will, and I mean this in like the best possible way, that he's going to come in, and even if he has adapted and maybe been knocked off the ball a couple times, he's still going to be like, yeah, but I got to beat somebody. Like, I want to put the ball between somebody's legs or run around them and get the ball on the other side, and then I'll feel like I've made my debut.
So my guess is that, again, with Llanez, this is a U23 possible call-up, as opposed to an actual senior men's national team, you're our new senior national team winger call-up. I think it's because he hasn't been involved with the U23s. This is almost like an accelerated, let's get a good look at him before qualifying in March. And we'll make the decision of whether to use him in March partially based on what we see in this camp.
Okay.
That seems fair.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me, So I think he's going to be exciting, but I also think he is a player who, if people haven't watched him and have only heard the hype about him, he will probably be, I'm not saying like talent-wise or like career-wise, but he will be more of a, like, I don't know, who came in with a lot of hype around them. Like, not Freddie Adu, obviously, but that's sort of...
That was about to be my answer.
I'm trying to remember, like, more, like Julian Green. Like, he's a player who maybe isn't quite ready for it, but I think has so much hype that if people are expecting him to come in and just torch defenses and automatically be a starter, he may do that, but I think more likely is that people will be a little bit disappointed. But I think that's unfair because that's not what we should be expecting of him right now.
My other weird question is, he's had such a great start with Wolfsburg U19s. You would have thought that, as has happened with, say, Gio Reyna at Dortmund, that the winter break in Germany would be the time that he goes and trains with the senior team.
Yep.
And I wonder, is it better for his career to have this January camp with the senior men's national team, or would it have been better to stay with Wolfsburg and see what happened in the winter?
We had a couple questions like that, and this is where I guess I am going to give U.S. soccer the benefit of the doubt and say that, I could see them maybe even Ulysses Llanez, who has publicly, his father as well, publicly said, we haven't heard anything, no one has contacted us, what's going on in U.S. soccer.
Because he's also eligible to play for the Mexican national team.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there could be, you could make an argument that this was U.S. soccer being look, we really want him in, we want to show that, he's part of our plan long term. And I think for Llanez, also, it's the first time he's called in, to the senior team at least, so he probably wouldn't want to turn that down.
Yeah.
And I think Wolfsburg would maybe see that as okay, we want to let him go back and train with the senior national team.
It's good for our player.
Yeah, I think so.
Do that. Yeah.
I think so.
He might come back knowing a couple more things than he did.
And the reality is also, if he impresses and becomes a national team regular, or even a squad member with the national team, that also helps Wolfsburg long term potentially. Put it that way.
Fair enough. All right, another new name on this roster is a new American.
Yes.
Jesus Ferreira.
Yes.
Jesus
Genuinely
Ferreira.
blanked for a minute. I was like, what's that now?
He's been here a long time. He's the son of David Ferreira. And I think he was technically Colombian until recently, where Jesus Ferreira did the whole ceremony thing, became an American citizen. He is 19 years old. I don't know if he's done the FIFA paperwork to play for the US men's national team. So we may not see him February 1st because the paperwork may not have been done. But
we're pretty sure someone on US Soccer's on that, right?
Someone's on it, yeah. But it's not it doesn't mean someone at FIFA's on it. You know what I'm saying?
Also true.
Yeah. They could have got a bounce back. We're out of the office until January, whatever email. But Jesus Ferreira is a player worth being excited about, in my opinion. He is, get ready for this, in his lack of an obvious position but all-round attacking usefulness, Firmino-ish.
Okay.
Right?
Now, my ears are... I'm excited now.
So,
tell me more.
He's he can play centre forward, right?
Does he have a winning smile?
It's not as bright as Firmino's.
Well, then I'm less interested.
But you know how Firmino's not a classic number 9, right? But he's not really a number 10. He's not really a winger. But it kind of works how he plays in that striker role for Liverpool, but bounces all over the place. I think of Ferreira a bit like that as well. He's like a 9.5, and he can play wide as well, right? So he does a bit of everything in that way, right? He can dribble, definitely. He runs at people. They're in trouble because he's got a nice quick change of direction as he's running at you. He's also very good at the slow down a little bit, draw someone in, drag back and then pass them 1-2 and you're away kind of thing. And then he's also, which I always find, again, the way that I find it exciting that Sam Vines knows to stand people up as a 19, 20-year-old. As a 19-year-old, Jesus Ferreira is a finisher who can just pick out the corner and bang it in that corner or curl it in that corner.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? He can pick his spot from a decent distance, 15 yards out, and find that bottom corner, and it's going in.
So with Firmino, though, I think of him...
And again, before anyone says anything, I'm not saying he's as good as Firmino.
Yeah, of course.
I'm saying his positional and his profile kind of fits with a Firmino type player.
I would like him to be as good as Firmino.
Yeah, that would work,
That
right?
would be terrific. But what I was going to ask is, Firmino can do all of those things, I think, because he has a very high soccer IQ and seems to be constantly aware. He seems to be the one that is most fluid in what he if Klopp tells him to do this, he'll do that. If Klopp asks him to do this, he'll do that, and I think can take it on himself. I guess what I'm asking is, do you see that sort of same inclination from Ferreira? Do you see him make those adjustments sort of in game? Do you see him checking around a lot? Some of the hallmarks of players who are very aware of their spacing and their position. Yeah, or even just the checking that we were talking about checking around to make sure he's open and trying to find those pockets of space.
I can say that I'm not as good at checking for that.
Okay.
So that may be there, but I haven't looked for it to see if it's
all
there.
Right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that when it comes to the January camp.
We'll ask Charvey to have a look for it.
Okay.
If anyone would have spotted it, he will have.
I mean, I do think he has that global repository of everybody who's checking space at any given moment. So just send an email to Xavi and see what happens.
He's checking videos all the time. So Jesus Ferreira, a player I think worth being excited about. Again, if the paperwork hasn't gone through, maybe we don't see him February 1st. It's a good possibility we see him with the U23s in March.
Yep.
Because if you remember, when you look at that U23 roster, a lot of talent on there, right? Mendes, Ledesma, Richards, all those guys. There wasn't the same top-end striker talent that gets you on the edge of your seat, really excited, unless they pull down a Josh Sargent or a Tim Ware from the senior team ranks.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But is that a good way of saying like how we feel like people should think about this January camp? We want to tell people how to think.
Anyway. Yeah.
Right. But I found myself. You kind of helped me figure this one out. That it really is just a matter of the hand gestures I was making. I think is what it came down to. Is I was saying to you like I'm having a hard time with this camp a little bit because it feels like we don't have. At least at the time that we were first talking about this, like we don't have a lot of the youth national team spots filled. Now I guess we have one more.
The coaching, you mean?
Yes, excuse me. Yeah, and so like I felt like, well, is this like a camp where we've got a bunch of players called in because we don't have certain things settled with those youth teams? We've got like some like 17s, some 18s, some 19s, some 20s, some older players. Like I don't know how to look at this because I don't know, is it like building towards the Olympics or building towards the national team or building towards youth national teams or just letting Greg Berhalter look at things. And this is where the hand gestures were as I was putting those all over the place. And you're like, I think the answer is yes. Like, we're going to do all those things in one camp. And I think that is the way to see this, is not all of these guys are being brought in and they're all sort of in the exact same spot of if you play really well, you're a national team like in that squad now. I think there are varying starting points for a lot of these guys in terms of their likelihood to make the national team in 2020.
And I think for a lot of them it is about the Olympics, especially for the obvious U23 guys like Brenden Aaronson or Jesus Ferreira or Ulysses Llanez or Paxton Pomykal. Mark McKenzie is a really good example, I think. It's about giving them a magnificent start to 2020 by because there is no U23 camp, right? So you bring them into the senior men's national team camp and they get 3 weeks with Greg Berhalter. They start in really sharp form. They get coached by the senior coaching staff. It gives them a great start to 2020. So they go into that, and then in March they'll be playing the qualifying games. I think it's all about that. I think it's just giving them a little bump in their career, a good start to the season, and a bit of momentum going into March. That's what it's about for the U23 players.
I agree with all of that. And then the way, because I'm sort of a visual person, the way I'm sort of picturing it is like, let's say Mark McKenzie is 20% of the way towards like getting a senior national team start or being a squad member for the national team.
Yeah.
And Pomykal is like 70% of the way there. So even if McKenzie has a really, really good game, maybe he bumps up 20%. He's still like not that close. Whereas Pomykal, if he has a really good game or justifies the call and he has 20%, now he's at 90%. So that's how I see it, is like different people are further along in that like way to make the national team. I still think a lot of these people are in there, though.
But I think the way to think about it is not how close is Mark McKenzie to being a senior men's national team centre-back. It's how close is Mark McKenzie to having a successful March under-23 CONCACAF Olympic qualifying cycle, right? That's the benefit of this camp for Mark McKenzie. It's not to establish himself above John Brooks and Matt Miazga.
Yeah.
He can't have a camp good enough to overtake either of those guys. He can have a camp where he was so impressive that he's definitely the U23 centre-back starter. And then he's learned a couple of tricks, and he will be better in March than he would have been if he just spent January watching TV.
And will almost certainly have been told, like, and you need to work on this, or like improve this a little bit, and then he's got a thing to improve that if he improves it, then it shows Berhalter, like, oh, he's working and capable of kind of adapting.
And if you think that stuff can't happen, listen to our Stu Holden interview from this week, where he said his first call-up was in January. Bob Bradley said to him, hey, you run around too much, maybe you need to calm it down a little bit and focus what you're doing. That improved Stu Holden's game for that season. So the advice you get from the senior men's national team coach can be really helpful. If you spend 3 weeks with them, it's really helpful.
I have nothing else to say because that feels like the perfect point of evidence to end on. So instead, let's move to some Twitter questions.
Yes.
Shall we?
Quick fire.
We're going to go quick fire? I'm excited for this.
I mean, we're an hour in already.
I've just got to put my quick fire apparel on. It's a jacket with flames. It's not a good look, but I only wear it for the quick fire
I think
round.
It looks great.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks. And the hat with flames, too. Dimitri Dube. What does...
Dubé, I believe.
Dubé?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Dimitri Dubé asks, what does Bryant Kayo, his involvement mean for the midfielders who are older but not involved in January camp, like Brendan Servania or Dotson? Aren't there other U17 players that would have seemed closer to a January camp call-up, such as Ricardo Pepi or Gianluca Busio?
So I know Busio is in the U20 camp that's currently taking place in Bradenton.
I'm going to show my ignorance here. Who is Dotson?
He is a defensive midfielder.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I genuinely did not know that name.
I think he plays for Minnesota.
Cool. All right, sweet. Apologies, Minnesota. Apologies, Dotson.
But I think it's one of those things where if you're not U23, maybe Savannah and Dotson are U23 eligible. So it is weird that I think Bryant Kayo is just the massive outlier.
Yeah.
That it's impossible to compare to everybody else because it's just odd that he's there.
Yeah,
right?
but I also think that it's odd that he's there, but his situation is odd. Again, 17, unattached. I think a lot of those guys, yes, there are camps that he could have gone into, and maybe those guys could have been in this camp, but I also think those guys are going to return to preseason. Busio's going to have preseason with Sporting KC. We don't really...
Busio's with the U20s.
Yeah, but then after afterwards him saying he'll go back to preseason with Sporting KC.
Yeah.
We don't know what Kayo will do because he's unattached.
I see.
So after this camp, maybe he'll go to a USL team, but maybe this is also an opportunity to like get him in with the senior team, and maybe that raises his profile a little bit. So like a USL Championship team is now like, we'll take him for 6 months until he goes to Germany when he turns 18.
Or he's super sharp when he goes over to Germany.
Or that too.
Yeah.
Or that too.
So I think we actually don't really know the answer to Dimitri's question, because Bryant Kayo's involvement is so different to everybody else's involvement.
Yeah, I would say, strangely,
we're saying it's a 25-man roster as well. It's not like he's on the 23. It's not like he's in the matchday squad.
I feel like normally, though, I would err on the side of like, no, if he's in the camp, it means he's like further along. I don't think I would say that with him. I wouldn't say he's not further along necessarily. I just don't think that that's why he's here.
Yeah.
He's not here because he's so close to being a regular player for the national team, as we've already established.
Yep. Okay. Next question from Morgan Tenzer. How many of these players will actually make a first-team debut this year, excluding the ones who are, quote, part of the group? I assume she means get a first cap, basically.
Yeah. And Morgan preempted me here because I was going to say like Paxton Pomykal is probably head and shoulders above everybody, but he already has the debut.
That head has a cap on it already.
It makes it a little bit harder. I'm inclined to say maybe Justen Glad, just because I think so many of the players we've already talked about aren't quite where he is in terms of his career and his development.
Yeah. And
then I think a ball-playing center back who can possess the ball and dribble out when he needs to, that feels like a player that Berhalter might want to take a look at.
I'm saying Mark McKenzie, but I think we're just biased towards the player that we researched.
Honestly, I would take McKenzie too, because because for everything you said about him with the U20s, but also the role he's had with Philly, and I think will be a bigger player. Austin Trusty gone now, so I think he'll have to step up and be an even bigger player for the Union. So I think that's also a solid shout, Daryl.
The uncapped player I'd put money on getting a cap against Costa Rica is Brenden Aaronson.
Yes.
Because the thing I mentioned earlier about he's already been on a roster,
Yep.
and the next progression would be to actually get on the field. So that's the guy that I would really double down on.
Okay, I like that one. So just your players.
Just my players.
All right, cool.
Players.
Sean Brooks. Berhalter has consistently used a deep-lying playmaker, Bradley Trapp Ewell. Ewell is the only one with a passing completion rate of 87% of above. That's decent, which is, I guess, the sign of a deep-lying playmaker, says Sean. Who else called into camp could compete for that role?
From what you said, Christian Cappis could compete for that role. But I don't think he's going to hit Jackson Ewell standards.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
The other option I've seen a few people mention is that maybe long-term Paxton Pomykal could be a number 6. But we've never actually seen it because he's played winger, he's played number 10, he's played number 8. So it would be a stretch for him to suddenly be the starting senior men's national team number 6. But maybe somewhere down the road, Paxton Pomykal could play that role.
Yeah, I think my hesitation there was just only because I think of him as like a more attacking player. And so because of that, he's like in the attack category. So then I was just like, no, you said the wrong place. Right? But it took me a minute to be like, yeah, I could see that. I think it's also because we still haven't really, one game we've seen Tyler Adams. So I think we still haven't seen the person who we think is going to be our starting number 6.
Yeah.
So I think because of that, then it still invites a lot of debate about like who could it be, and maybe it's this, or could we try that? But I think the reality is it's probably, when he's fit, Tyler Adams, and then Jackson Ewell behind him.
Interesting. In your head, at least.
Oh, and then I guess Michael Bradley's in there too. Good point. Forgot about the MB.
River City 93.
Never forget about Dre. Sometimes forget about Michael Bradley.
River City 93, the Richmond Kickers podcast. This is Elliot, I believe, asking this question. Do you believe this camp will be more about teaching guys the principles of play or the system, or will it be used more as to see who can fit in with the core group of guys?
Yes.
Yeah, it's both, right?
It's both.
Those aren't two different things. I think if you're taught the principles of play that Berhalter likes, then you become part of the core group of guys.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think I think maybe Elliot is more in like my mindset of like who's the closest to being that, and like so then it has to be like, well then if some people are closer than others, then are you developing those guys for squaddom and then simultaneously teaching the other guys? And I think it's sort of teaching everybody the same thing to see how they respond, basically, and then also maybe developing squad players from there. So yeah, I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all.
Dan Vaughan asks, if the January camp is how Berhalter stocks his quote-unquote group, does that mean we'll always have a core group from Major League Soccer and players from Europe will always have to be superstars to get time? Seems like a weird hurdle, almost the opposite of Jurgen Klinsmann.
Yeah, I've had this same thought, and I think you and I have even talked about it several times off air and then at least once or twice on air. It's my concern. I don't think that they will have to be superstars, though. I think, again, it's worth remembering how many injuries and how many moves and weird little extenuating circumstances have been problematic in 2019. So I think that's part of the reason why we haven't seen as many European-based players. What I think is more likely is instead of it being there's always going to be this core group, I think there's always going to be that question about why aren't you looking at this person? Why haven't they called in this person? And I think it does start with January. But Alfredo Morales this season, they're kind of a sustained campaign of why know him, why know him, why know him, and then eventually there was him once that kind of group was established.
But it is also true that the only time you can have, outside of a tournament, a summer tournament, the only time you can get the players together for a concentrated period is January. And the only players available in January are 90% Major League Soccer players. So I think this might be a thing that if you're an MLS player, you do have a better chance of sneaking into that group by being called up, learning the positional play stuff, impressing Berhalter, and then sort of you hang on for dear life and you're part of the roster. Whereas a player in Europe doesn't have the opportunity to come in and spend those 3 weeks. But it's not a conscious choice by Berhalter. It's just the situation. It just is how it is, right?
But is that better? That it's just the situation, it is how it is? Because it's still the reality is that, they kind of do have a leg up. And it's part of it is that I think it's
Christian Roldan has a leg up on Dwayne Holmes in that sense. Yeah.
Do you think, is it just a matter of when he was appointed? That if he had been appointed in May, he doesn't have that January camp right away. I think it's that he's appointed in December, has the January camp, and that's his first time with the national team.
Right, but then there'd be the next January camp, and players would spend a lot of time with him in that January camp, and then those players become more exposed to the methods.
I'm just saying because literally the cycle starts in January this time around, does January have more significance than if he had been appointed in June?
I guess yes,
it probably does.
For the initial group, for sure. Yeah.
All right. So a worrying thing, I would say, but maybe not as worrying.
Only if you want to find things to worry about. Next question comes from Rich.
I will.
Have they used this roster as a chance to expose the U23s to mentoring and the new style of play, as was suggested pretty solidly on Scuffed? Scuffed, I believe, is some sort of football podcast.
Football?
Yeah.
Like throwball?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why they would be talking about this, but I'll have to check it out. It's interesting. Yes, we loved our friends at Scuffed. And yes, I think that is precisely what this is.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much mentoring from player to player. That's probably a little bit of that, but I think I'm only not as inclined to go with that just because of what you said. There aren't as many established senior team veterans in this camp.
Yeah.
But I still think, yes, it's to be brought in to learn from pros, even just how to play in a camp, what January camp is like.
Yeah, and it doesn't. I do think we maybe get obsessed with the Berhalter principles of play stuff. Part of it is just being exposed to senior players and the senior coaching staff. Right? It's just getting more experience as a soccer player. Right. That's what it's all about. Next question comes from Greg Margulis. Why not bring in a player like Emerson Heinemann instead of Sebastian Lletget or Christian Roldan? Get a new look at as many players as possible. Same goes for anyone else besides Zardes at striker.
So as I said earlier, Hyman was initially called in. It's just Atlanta blocked that one.
I didn't see him on the list. I saw Miles Robinson.
Oh, you're right. Excuse me.
Guzan.
Huh. So maybe it was that Atlanta. We're going to reject no matter what.
They wouldn't have let him go.
But even
and there's the backstory to that, right? That Miles Robinson was part of a squad.
Yeah.
And then they have those. If you don't play in a game, they have a little practice game afterwards for the men's national team. And Miles Robinson got injured.
I forgot about this
in that post-match practice game and missed playoff games for Atlanta.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of Atlanta not being happy with the U.S. men's national team right now.
So then why do you think Berhalter didn't want to go that route?
Didn't want to go what route?
Didn't want to call in Hyman over those other options.
Well, I don't know if he did or not, but I do think I disagree basically with the get a new look at as many players as possible approach. Because I think if you are going to have the Berhalter setup, you've got to have some of the players who already know it to make those sessions go well, right? Okay. So that's why you look at you've got say Roldan and Lletget, and then you've got Anderson and Pomykal.
Yeah.
Two there always are, a master and an apprentice.
And one final thing on this one, I just wanted to find it again because we had a question about where Hyman fits in with the national team. I asked Felipe Cardenas about that. It was on another show, but just to reiterate, he basically said Berhalter will continue to invite MLS players to camp, so if Hyman performs well under De Boer, he could have a shot this year. But
I thought January was a shot, though.
Well, we'll see what happens. But the U.S. midfield is pretty deep right now. As an attacking midfielder, he's going to have a tough time unseating some of Berhalter's preferred choices, so I think it goes to what you said, which is that he wants the people who've been there before, then the up-and-comers who can sort of learn a little bit from that. And I think Hyman is he's like the kid who's just moved outside of the age of still being like adorably cute.
And And
that's where he is.
He can't play U23s qualifying in March, right? So that's why it's better to go with Aaronson and Pomykal.
There we are.
All right, Rob the fourth.
Yep.
Can Ferreira play the 9 in the Berhalter style?
I think I am the one uniquely positioned to answer this one, which is my way of saying, Daryl, you want to answer that one?
I think yes.
Okay.
And I think because of the thing I said earlier about him being sort of a 9.5, where he's not like hanging on the shoulder of a defender, he likes to come deep.
Right.
I think that is part of what Berhalter asks his striker to do, right? The part of the pattern of play that Berhalter likes and that you definitely see the team perform is the number 9 comes deep and shows, and then a winger like runs in behind him because hopefully the number 9 has like dragged a defender out with him, and then there's some space to exploit, and then someone else goes in behind.
Right.
I think, and Ferreira's quite good at like combining with come deep, like have a layoff, combine with teammates. So I actually think he will suit the system quite nicely.
Right, and then to combine that question with Greg's question, once again, there's no Josie Altidore in camp. Josh Sargent is not in camp either.
Yeah.
So if you want someone for Ferreira to learn from, it's going to be Josie Zardes, who's already done it a bunch under Berhalter.
And I was kind of obviously making a Star Wars joke, the Master and Apprentice thing, but I actually think that is a good way to look at this roster and the way Berhalter thinks about constructing rosters in general.
And historically, that policy worked out super well. So hopefully they go that route too, I guess. And maybe bring somebody back for. I guess that means we're gonna have to bring Alexi Lalas back for like the next World Cup. That's how it works, basically, based on Star Wars logic.
Yeah,
perfect.
The retired speak.
Oh, what a dumb intro. Adam Leahy, what would you look at to determine if this camp was successful? What takeaways are you looking to get from this crop of players in January?
This is a good question, but I think the answer is that we don't know, because the only evidence we will have of this camp will be the televised game against Costa Rica. But you'll just see 90 minutes of soccer. You won't see much of the 3 weeks of work that has happened in camp, right? We don't, like, Mark McKenzie, for example, could play 30 minutes in this game. We won't really know from that 30 minutes what strides he's made as a centre-back in this camp. I think it's one of those things that is just somewhat behind the curtain, and we just won't know.
Yeah, and maybe we've had
which is a frustrating answer, but I think it's the truthful answer.
I think it is too, but I think that it's been long enough for me seeing Berhalter in the national team. Or maybe just other news has been even more bleak that it's maybe a little more optimistic about the national team this year. But I also think we won't know right away coming out of January. I think we really will know in the ensuing months when
in March maybe with U23 qualifying.
Exactly, or if say Bryant Kayo as an example, again very unlikely, but if we see him suddenly brought in for the March international or whenever the next international break is, then that means they impress. So I think you can look at what comes after to see who stood out in this camp. So I think you're absolutely right. We won't know just based on performance, but I do also think we can learn a few things from the performance. If there is another very attacking left back coupled with an attacking right back, maybe that shows us a little bit of intent, because we did see Berhalter try different things in that first January camp.
Like a new shape or new patterns of play or a slightly different system. Yeah.
Or if Pomykal is a number 6, or if certain people are played in different spots, it continues to show that there is evolution and adjustment and trying different things, hopefully with it all building towards the U.S. looking somewhat competent in that February friendly.
Yeah, it's almost like the two things are related, but they're not necessarily hand in hand, right? That game against Costa Rica could be make your eyes bleed to watch, which January games often do. That just means that it wasn't a good spectacle, but it doesn't mean that the whole camp was unsuccessful.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And here is my final thing I would say about this one, because I think it's important, is that with everything we've said, there are people on this roster that were Mark McKenzie could become a breakout national team player, potentially. Yeah. Paxton Pomykal has already made an appearance, but he could be a more regular one. But I don't think there's anybody in here necessarily where this person is definitely going to make that jump. I cannot wait to see them play. We have high hopes for lots of these players, and that's what I would say, is just that you shouldn't realistically see any of these people as they're definitely going to make that jump to the senior squad right away. Yeah. So if somebody does, it means they really, really, really stood out. And if they didn't, then it means it kind of went as we expected. Yeah. So I don't think there's a huge negative that could come out of this really in any way.
I think that's fair.
And that, I guess, is progress.
Final question. Yeah. Ben Carrion asks, with this camp seeming more U23 oriented, do you expect Greg Berhalter to try and implement all of his principles of play or to be more pragmatic in his approach? I will tell you now, Greg Berhalter would hate this question.
He really, really would.
Because it implies that his principles of play are not pragmatic.
Right. I'm trying to think how he would answer that.
he'd stare at you for like 5 seconds.
It would be
first.
a 5 Mississippi pause. You're absolutely right. And then I think it would be a sort of like, I mean, I don't see why those two things have to be different.
Yeah.
No, he'd say it better than that and be a little bit more harsh. But yes.
And so we're not trying to answer this question as Greg Berhalter. I think if the coach himself doesn't see a delineation between these two things, then he's not going to coach in a delineated way.
No.
Right?
Yes. But I think in the spirit of what Ben is asking, I'll take the jump and say that I think it's going to be more about getting people to play the way Berhalter wants as opposed to like, it's not going to be, oh, we only have this few people, so instead we're going to play a back three because that makes more sense with this group. It's going to be, can this group do what I'm asking of them, not can I do what they need me to do.
Right.
Sort of.
And he'll find out in January
He will.
if McKenzie can do what he's asking,
He will.
if Aaronson can, and so on and so on and so on. All right. I think we spent a long time with this January roster. Do you want to very quickly just get into the couple of hires that have happened at US Soccer House?
It's been so long, I forgot we were going to do that.
There have been two U20 hires. The US men's national team under 20s have a new head coach, and the US women's national team under 20s have a new head coach. Which one would you like to talk about first, Taylor?
I think Laura Harvey.
Okay.
Let's start with Laura Harvey.
All right.
Because we talked about the possibility of this on one of our shows last week. And I will say I owe you an apology because I was sort of dismissive of you saying, like, I think she's going to take the U20 job.
Yeah.
Because Laura Harvey is former coach at Arsenal, coached there for 4 or 5 years, I believe, has coached in the NWSL at various points. She's I think, interim U23 national team coach. She has lots of experience. That is a coach that I expected some country who's trying to like move up a little bit higher in the rankings or to move up their program. That I thought she was going to a national team. I thought she was going to a club team in England or France.
Yeah.
I think this is a huge get by the US U20s and by Kate Markgraf bringing her in. I really, really do.
Interesting. All right. So why would Laura Harvey want the job then if you think maybe she was high profile enough, and she was high profile enough, to take some theoretically more senior jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple different reasons, but all of them, I guess, sort of lead to I think she wants the senior job someday. And she was, if not a short list, then she was one of the candidates that Kate Markgraf initially had. I believe
according to an interview with Meg Linehan and The Athletic, she was someone they spoke to at least. Yeah.
And then I believe spoke to after about why she wasn't offered the job, and then those conversations continued, and that led to her taking this job over the holidays.
Yep. Was it that she looked mean in her headshot?
That was it. That was the only thing. That was the only thing. No, I mean, I think
I love that headshot.
And I do think that like it helps to be involved in the U.S. system if you want to be the national team manager.
I think so too.
And then another point that was made by a couple of different people, Kim McCauley, I think Meg asked it in that article, was like there's some criticism about your tendency or lack of a tendency to bring through young players and develop the youth. And you don't really need to develop young players for the U20s because they're already young players who are developing. You know what I mean? It's like you're not developing a 16-year-old to play for the 20s. You're developing a 20 to play for the 20s.
I don't find that to be a really useful criticism because it's not as if she's going to try and call a 30-year-old player into the under-20s, right?
Exactly.
So she's going to have under-20
Yeah, I know that
players.
didn't make sense because it's like you don't want the U20 coach to develop young players. That's not what I mean. I just mean that like she's literally hamstrung by that age restriction, so she can only call in young players.
Yes.
But I do think that probably then, if there were to be another interview, Vlatko wins the World Cup, and then he says, that's enough for me, and they're looking for somebody. Now she has the club coaching career that's very successful. Then with the U20s, we would assume, or at least we hope, will be successful, and then some of those questions are answered.
The other appeal to the job is that qualifying for the U20 World Cup is in February. So she is like in and at it, and like things are happening straight away. So it's kind of a hit the ground running, like because the ground is moving kind of job. So that's kind of exciting, I think, if you're Laura Harvey. I did see a quick flash before
Also
we started.
from Utah, so used to the cold, so won't mind Chicago.
She's from Nuneaton, Warwickshire. She's a West Midlands
formerly
West
employed in
Midlands
Utah, and then she's from so she's used to harsh winters. She'll be fine. She'll be fine.
So that is the U20s on the women's side. On the men's side, Anthony Hudson has been hired as the U20 men's national team coach. Former Colorado Rapids coach. He was fired mid-season because they weren't doing very well. Connor Casey and then Robin Fraser came in and the team did much better. This is not a hire that has got a lot of people excited.
No, but I think if you see it from one lens, it's a very smart hire.
Why is that?
So there's the old Calvin and Hobbes joke about how he's asked to shovel the walk and he just like makes intermittent paths that don't go anywhere and don't connect. And then you see Hobbes look at him quizzically and Calvin turns and says, sometimes if you do the job poorly enough, they don't ask you to do it again. And I feel like maybe they hired a coach that was going to be so controversial and so ill-received that we're not going to ask them to hire any more coaches. And then U.S. Soccer doesn't have that headache anymore. That's my theory.
They won't have to hire any more coaches.
Well, no, we'll just stop asking because it's like, if that's who you all are going to go with when we put you under pressure, we will not put you under pressure anymore.
Okay, that's one theory for why Anthony Hudson was hired as head coach. What's a more...
You're not buying that?
I'm not. What's a more realistic theory? Why is this guy who just had a really unsuccessful season with the Colorado Rapids... And by the way, I've got his stats as a coach in front of me. I have his win percentage as Colorado Rapids coach in front of me, according to Wikipedia. Can you take a guess as to what it is?
Is it higher than 0%? Let's start there. So he did win a game.
Yeah.
Off to a solid start. Has he won more than 10% of his games that he's played?
Yes.
Has he won more than 30% of his games that he's played?
No.
Did not think so. 26%.
17.39% win percentage.
Even worse. Yikes. Price is right at this one way out of my game.
Yep. His whole career, his win percentage has been below 50%. The only time he has a higher win percentage is when he's been a U23 coach with Bahrain and a U23 coach with New Zealand. He's also had the senior jobs at Bahrain and at New Zealand.
Do you have in front of you, was he concurrently the U23 and senior coach in New Zealand? Because I feel like that's a thing they do.
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was concurrently the U23 and senior coach with New Zealand. Got them to the World Cup playoffs, which you kind of always get to the playoffs in Oceania as New Zealand. Didn't get them to the World Cup. So ultimately unsuccessful as New Zealand coach.
True. But I think you just said a thing in there that maybe is important if we want to maybe see this from Ernie Stewart's perspective, which is that the only time he's had success was when?
With the U23s?
Right, so when he's coaching the U23s. So maybe coaching younger teams
is a small
is a better
sample
one?
size, though, right? Because as U23 New Zealand coach, he played 4 games. As Bahrain U23 coach, he played 10 games. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, that's great.
Or coach 10 games.
No,
right.
I mean, I do think that this is maybe an example of a coach who has a little bit of name recognition, not the type we want, was willing to live in Chicago, was willing to take that job. It is certainly a more desirable position to coach the women's U20 team than it is the men's, I think, right now, given the state of the programs and sort of the way the federation is being perceived.
Okay, I would accept that given that the women just won the World Cup. I would say this U20 job should be appealing because we do have good generations of talent coming up for men's soccer. But I guess that path to the US Women's National Team senior job is what's really appealing for Laura Harvey about the U20s, whereas that's not necessarily the case with the men's U20s.
You're also talking on the field. I'm talking off the field. Of if you're an up and coming coach or a coach who has lots of success at youth levels, I just feel like we've heard a lot of stories about the way things are with U.S. soccer that I don't know. Even if you have that pedigree, even if you do have this opportunity to work with very promising young players, there still might be enough like bureaucratic framework, like office politics, stuff like that might make you less inclined to take a job in Chicago.
Fair enough. All right. I'm not excited about this hire, but I would say that maybe the thing US Soccer are thinking of, here's a young coach, he's only 38 years old, with 10 years coaching experience, and he's coached 2 different national teams, including their U23 setup. I can see how on paper that kind of makes it an appealing hire, especially if you're struggling for other candidates. Right? That doesn't mean that's not me saying that's why this is a good hire, but it's me saying this is why it kind of makes sense, I think, if you're Ernie Stewart.
Just because there's a little bit of experience?
Yeah,
like, isn't that the bare minimum for what you should be looking for in a job, though?
Not really, because people get hired for national team jobs without ever having national team experience.
True. Rafael Vicky, had only managed in the Swiss League like 1 year and then got laid off. So, yeah, okay. I think
you get what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's my sort of rationale for maybe why Anthony Hudson got the U20 job.
Okay.
There is a camp happening in Bradenton, Florida right now. The players were selected before Anthony Hudson got the job. But at the end of camp, there are 2 friendlies against Mexico. So we will have a feeling for how this is going pretty soon, right? If he beats Mexico twice, suddenly everyone's like, all right, let's give this Hudson guy a chance. If we lose twice to Mexico, I think we're off to a bad start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is correct. Yeah.
Backwards momentum is what that will be.
Yeah, I think I'll just, my final point on this one would just be that, like, I have yet to see anybody say, like, okay, but here's the thing. Like, yes, he was unpopular, but he did this. Or yes, it wasn't really working, but he's done this previously. And I hear everything you've said, but I have heard much more of, like, historically unpopular, threw his players under the bus. His own players have come out and said he wasn't a very good coach or they didn't enjoy playing under him.
It was Jared Watts, who, to be fair, did leave the Rapids after preseason. And so didn't really play for Hudson, but had a preseason with Hudson and tweeted after the hire that I knew after preseason we were going to have a bad year.
Fair.
Yeah.
But I would love to have seen somebody say, like, but I thought we might have a good year. Like, I have yet to see a piece that's sort of going into why he makes sense, why it could theoretically work out.
Yeah.
And I think because I've only seen negative stuff and negative coverage, and especially negative stuff from people I respect and think are very well informed and trust. That is where some of my you're up there. You're like in the B category. No, of course. But I think that's where some of my negativity / trepidation comes from.
Yep. Okay. So I guess we'll just have to watch this one unfold and see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. That is all the news we've got about U20 hirings. I think we did a good job introducing or getting to know the lesser known senior men's national team January camp players a little better. That is all the Total Soccer Show for this week. It was a bumper Thursday episode. We will be back.
So much so that it is only 4 hours until it's no longer Thursday.
So we will close by saying, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again on Monday.